Hello. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. Hello, Randy. How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Very good. Well, first of all, obviously, thank you so much for your time. We know you're really busy schedule, especially right now, so I go straight on to the point.
Sure.
Because after 20 years in the business, you've been in the ring with a lot of legends, and you face many different styles. But I would like to know in your own words, what are the positives and the negatives of old school wrestling versus the actual wrestling style?
That's an interesting question. I think there's differences, obviously, than the way I was taught by the old school guys. That psychology, however, hasn't changed. I think that the basic idea of how to tell a story in the ring is still the same that it was back when my dad did it, back when my grandpa did it. Good guy, bad guy, and you play with the emotions of the crowd. You know, the good guy comes in, the conquering hero with the WWE World Heavyweight Championship around his waist, and Drew's by no means new school. He's been doing this as long as me. So in that regard, I think that Sunday at SummerSlam, I'm going to try and tell a story. And I don't tell 4-minute stories or 10-minute stories. It's going to be a novel. I'm going to be out there for 25, 30, 35 minutes, maybe even more. And I think that's when the magic is able to happen. When you're out there and you can settle down and you can build and build and build to a point in the match where people are on the edge of their seats. And obviously that's the goal for everybody. That doesn't happen every match, but you know as well as I do, when all those variables are in place, you know, fans or not, pandemic era or not, PC or Amway Center or someone's backyard, if you can play on those fans' emotions and get them on the edge of their seat, then you're telling a good story. And I don't think anything's changed in that regard from old school to new school. I think that new school is more of that independent wrestling mentality. We have a lot of indie guys that have been called up to NXT and WWE, a lot of guys that can tell a wonderful story. It's a little faster paced. It's a little more, I think the right word to describe it would be dangerous. I think that if our fans knew how much these guys were risking sometimes and putting their neck on the line sometimes just for one match out of the year to try and get a look or grab that brass ring, I think that they would understand a little better. It's definitely an exciting style, but I think the new school, the fast pace, the bumps all over the place, all the false finishes, the non-stop action, I think that hurts in the long run the story you're trying to tell. But in the grand scheme, I think that the psychology hasn't changed. These athletes that they're breeding these days are just getting more and more athletic. Their ability to do things physically better than past generations, things that have never been even seen before, especially in past generations. Their ability to do that is at an all-time high. So I enjoy watching the new school style, and I can tell when there's a guy that I think can tell a story with that new school style, but I don't think it's really changed that much.
Once again, that is star one to ask a question. If you find your question has been answered, you may remove yourself from the queue by pressing star two. We will take our next question from Kenny McIntosh with Inside the Ropes. Please go ahead.
Hey, Randy, how's it going?
Hey.
Listen, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about Ric Flair. Obviously, the angle that you guys had the other week where you punted him in the head and that emotional, realistic promo really resonated with people. Everybody keeps talking about it as a kind of classic segment. Talk about getting to work again with Rick at this stage of the game when, you know, there's a point we maybe didn't think he'd be able to come back and do something like this.
Yeah, gosh, not too long ago, we didn't know if we were going to, you know, still have Rick around when he was in that coma. And I mean, me as well as I'm sure his entire family, all his friends, they were devastated because, you know, especially his daughter. And I've known her since she was in high school. He's brought her around, so seeing how that affected her was hard. But if anyone's going to pull through a coma and look death in the eye and tell him to fuck off, it's Ric Flair. And that's exactly what he did. And, yeah, to answer your question, I never would have thought in a million years he'd be allowed back in a ring. And there was even a time, like I said, where I didn't know how much longer he was going to be with us. Slipping into a coma at that age, after the life, all the hits he's taken and everything. I mean, a lot of abuse to that body, but it just goes to show how tough of an individual Ric Flair is. And that segment, that was hard to do. There was so many things that I could have said that would have been nasty and would have even made that segment better. But it was hard to look him in the eye, no matter how much we wanted it to come across that way. It was hard to be mean to that man because of how he's treated me for the past 20 years especially. But, business is business, and Rick knows that, and I know that. So we gave it a shot, and I'll tell you what, he was never supposed to grab the microphone from me that night. He was just supposed to say a few things under his breath that the handheld camera in the ring may or may not have picked up, but you were supposed to kind of see our facial expressions and get an idea that he was bringing me back in. And eventually we had the hug, and then I turned on him. But when he grabbed the mic, I was thinking, oh, come on, Rick, you're not supposed to grab the mic. And then he went on to cut that promo, and it was very touching. And the thing is he meant everything he said, and that's why he's so special to this business. Is he's always left his heart out there in that ring, and every emotion you get from Ric Flair out there in that ring, it's real. Those are real emotions, and that's one of the reasons he's the best.
We will take our next question from Giuseppe Di Giovanni with Ask News. Please go ahead.
Randy, after 18 years of a fantastic career, do you think that this is the best moment in your career inside the ring and as a promo man? Because your promo are appreciated all over the world in the last year.
Oh, thank you. I've had some good years. I've had some injuries. I've gotten in some trouble where I've had to take some time, some weeks, months away from the ring. I feel like personally right now, I'm kind of at an all-time high as a human being and a father. And then I think that translates to work as well. So, at 40 years old, I think I finally figured out how to kind of balance everything, balance work and balance life. And, I learned a lot from Rick. And like I said about Rick earlier, I think all those emotions you're seeing out there, they're very, very real. And the ones that maybe aren't too real, they were created from or inspired by a real emotion that he had anyway. And that's kind of a page out of his book that I've taken. And with my promos, you said my promos have gotten better. I've just now, since I started working with Jeff Hardy, I think in 2018, I started realizing that in the ring, as far as physicality and the matches go, there's not much more. I'm not going to all of a sudden start doing, a Spanish fly off the top rope. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to start doing moonsaults to the floor, and I don't need to. But how could I better myself in the WWE? And I knew what the answer was. It's been staring me in the face for quite a long time. It was the promos, and I was never a promo guy. I wasn't absolutely rotten, but I would kind of go out there, and you could tell it was a scripted promo. I think the difference now is pretty plain and simple, and it's that I'm not scripted. Vince has been really, really lenient with me as far as feeling it out there. the stuff I did with Edge and Beth at the earlier part of the year, I think we were in Brooklyn before the pandemic hit. I had a couple segments with Edge and Beth over the course of that month building to WrestleMania where Vince didn't even want to know what I was going to say because he was so impressed with the prior weeks on the mic. And then when we went out there and killed it, I forget which night it was. It might have been the one with Beth, but when I came backstage, Vince looked at me, he took off the headset and he said, "That's your Oscar right there." And, you know, to have Vince McMahon, who's seen all of the greats a million times, do better than, you know, I've ever done on the mic, for him to put me over in that regard, I knew I must be onto something good. And it just, to answer your question, yeah, I think that I'm firing on all cylinders. I've had a lot of injuries, but I've also been very diligent with making sure that my body can hold up. And I think at 40, I think I could wrestle into my late 40s and be fine. And I think the mic work will only get better. My only, I wish I would have thought of this years ago when I was in my 20s, but I was just a dumb punk-ass kid. And, you know, I was naturally very good. So I didn't have to try when it came at a lot of things as far as telling a story in the ring that came naturally to me. On the mic, it didn't come naturally to me. And it was almost like I had to slowly learn how to progress on the microphone. And when it comes down to it, I can stumble, I can stutter, I can talk under my breath. But as long as I mean what I'm saying, it's going to be a good promo. Where a good promo to me used to mean that I hit every word that was in the script or that I hit my time just right. There was a promo earlier in the year where we went like 5 minutes over. It might have even have been more like 7 minutes over, and it was because the promo was so good and Edge and I just kept going and going. But the people were eating it up. And normally if you go 5 minutes over on a segment on live television on the USA Network, you're going to come back to Gorilla and Vince McMahon's going to slap you. But that wasn't the case because it was such good shit. And when you have the ability to steal time from other people, which is heavily looked down upon, and I don't recommend anyone else doing it, but when you take time like that without asking, and then it turns out that the boss, Vince McMahon, is happy that you improv'd out there and that you know, took the bull by the horns and you decided to steal those minutes, that meant a lot. So I feel like my confidence is getting better in the microphone, and I'm only going to get better from here.
We will take our next question from Stephanie Chase with Digital Spy. Please go ahead.
Hi, Randy.
Hello.
You've had a tremendous run this year, and you're coming up to nearly 20 years in WWE. But thinking about this year, we're seeing the Legend Killer again. You've had the association with Rick, and you worked with Edge. It's almost like a revisiting of the early years of your career. Are you conscious of that connection with your past? And do you feel like you're almost having a full circle moment in WWE?
Yeah, it was funny because working with Sean the other day brought back a lot of memories. Of course, being in the ring with Rick for a few months recently brought back a lot of memories. Big Show I've known. I met Big Show when I was 20 years old down in OVW. And then, of course, Edge and Christian. And I think the biggest thing for me when it hit me, what you're referring to, was when Edge came back and he was in the Royal Rumble. And I kind of had an idea where we were going for WrestleMania. Wasn't set in stone. But when I saw Edge enter the Royal Rumble, and he came in a few entrants before me, but when I was watching in Gorilla, I saw him hit the ring. I saw the look on his face. I saw how he, after 9 freaking years, hadn't lost a beat. And it took me right back to 2003, 4, all the way through 2007, where me and him really had a lot of our time together in that ring. And it's like I was taken back in time because he reminded me of the Edge of old, and that pumped me up because I knew he was back after not wrestling for almost 10 years, and there was only one guy that he was going to work with, and it was me. So talk about, tooting your own horn. That made me feel real good. And I've got a reputation of being safe. I mean, shit happens. I broke Dave Batista's nose jumping out of a cake on Raw the night after Evolution turned on me back in 2004. I didn't mean to break his nose, but for 3 months he couldn't breathe. Shit happens, you know what I mean? But aside from that, as long as you're in there with somebody who puts your safety, your well-being ahead of theirs, and the other person's doing the same, then you're going to have a good match. You know what I mean? You can't have a good match and a guy break his arm. You can't have a good match and then at the end of the match, like some guy got a concussion 5 minutes in. It's a dance. There's art to it, but it's also a brutal contest between two individuals, and there's a line. There's a line to where you can kick a guy so hard in the stomach that it looks like you killed him. And with the right selling technique, it looks like you killed him. But you don't have to really kick him in the stomach. There's an art to it. And Edge knew that I wasn't one of those guys that was going to kick him in the stomach. If that makes any sense. Maybe I should be using his neck as the body part in reference. But he had the neck surgery, and he knew that I would do what I had to do to work around the possibility that his neck might not be ready for in-ring action. And it just comes to me remembering back in the day, learning from him how to take care of guys, how to prioritize when you're in the ring, the most important things, and to have a good match, but to stay safe. And another thing, you mentioned 20 years I'm coming up on, and it's funny because my very first professional wrestling match when I was in the WWE was in January of 2000. I was under developmental contract, and I think the first week of January, going on 21 years ago, I had my first match. And a lot of times the announcers, they'll say, "Oh, Randy Orton, it's his 18th year in WWE." And it pisses me off because every minute I've been in that ring to me is valuable, and I feel like 18 years is shortchanging me. And when they talk about someone like Shinsuke, who's only been in the WWE for a handful of years, they talk about how he's wrestled for 20 because he started in Japan when he was young and he wrestled for 20 years. If Shinsuke's career counts as 20 years from his very first match back in Japan, then my career should count from my very first match. So going forward, I'm going to always hit that 20-year, that 2-decade remark, going on 21 years. And I look at someone like Mysterio, someone like Chris Jericho. These guys have been around for 30 years, the Hardy Boys. Like, to me, there's the amount of championships I've won, all my accolades. I've been here a long time. I've done a lot. But when it comes down to it, I want to have a 30-year career. So in order to do that, I got to make sure when I'm at year 20, 21, people aren't referring to it as year 18. and that is just a little pet peeve, but I feel like very righteous in my feelings for wanting every second to count. But yeah, as far as your original question, it felt like I was right back in the beginning of the 2000s in Evolution, working with Shawn, Edge, Rick, Show, Christian, and it's been a blast. Mainly because I love those guys, traveled the world with those guys for years, but mainly because we all know how to take each other in there, have a good time, and steal the show.
We will take our next question from Alejandro Zuniga with Excelsior. Please go ahead.
Hi, Randy. Good morning.
Hello. I'm not hearing the journalist, just so you know.
Mr. Zuniga, are you able to hear us, sir?
Yeah, do you hear me?
Now we can. Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay. I mean, Randy, I'm going to repeat. Hi, good morning, Randy. The question is,
good morning.
What mean for you, Ric Flair? I mean, you're going to break his record. How is it? What is the importance to you for Ric?
You know, I saw Ric Flair say that he wanted me to beat his record. Not John Cena's record, but his record. And I think the only people ahead of me between Rick and myself is Triple H and John Cena. I may be wrong. I know a lot of guys have won a lot of championships. But just like the amount of time that I've been wrestling, it's important to me, those numbers. And the more history you can make in WWE, the more, you're going to be a household name one day. And I've worked so hard. It's like, how could I be so close with 13 World Heavyweight Championship runs? Like I'm like 3 away. Ric Flair has 16, correct? And he's tied with John Cena? I just want to make sure I have that right. It is 16? Okay, I'm going to assume that it is 16. Yeah, okay, 16. Yeah, so what I've always had a kind of this idea in the back of my head the last few years that we have gotten closer and closer to that Ric Flair world title mark. I think one more world title for me, and it ties me with Triple H. 2 more after that, it ties me with Cena and Rick. And then another one would put me in the very front. How cool would it be for me to wrestle Triple H, to win the title a few more times, and then have a match with John Cena to break the tie of 16 World Heavyweight Championships? And I don't know if Ric Flair would be the referee. I think he would be like a special ringside commentator or in one of our corners, depending on, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. But could you imagine like John Cena as a heel with Ric Flair in his corner, me as the babyface, both of us at 16 world titles, and main eventing WrestleMania, say in 3, 4, 5 years to see who breaks that tie? To me, that would be the ultimate way to eventually ride off into the sunset. Now, that's, I might be dreaming there, but a lot of things would have to happen for that to take place. But since I've been thinking of that storyline, I'll tell you what, that's all you need to know, because that proves that the number of world titles means a lot to me. Definitely a feather in my cap. So yes, I would love to at least tie with Rick and John, but to come out 17-time World Heavyweight Champion, I don't know that there's anyone else that could do it. Roman Reigns, I don't know when he's supposed to come back. I'm not even really sure how many world titles he's won. Maybe 3 or 4 or 5, but I don't know that there's any WWE superstar on the roster right now that could come close to even where I'm at now at 13. So I feel like we'd be wasting an opportunity if we didn't somehow try to make like a big soap opera for 6 months, for a year, about the story of those reigns. But good question. No one's ever asked me that before, believe it or not.
We will take our next question from Riju Dasgupta with Sportskeeda. Please go ahead.
Hey, Randy. Big honor to speak to you. Hi. So while you are obviously the biggest name on Raw, a former tag team partner of yours on SmackDown is making quite the name for himself. He's going after all the people that he's had an issue with in the past, and this man is Bray Wyatt. Do you think in your current incarnation, Orton versus The Fiend would be a good feud?
I think the potential would be there for it to be a good feud. The Fiend is a character that's really hard to figure out because I know at first he was supposed to be comparable to the Devil and a bad guy through and through, obviously, but times have changed. And I think a lot of people really enjoyed the Undertaker-like magic that the Fiend brought to the table. I thought Bray versus Cena at WrestleMania, when I heard about it, what they were going to do cinematically, I thought, oh, that's going to be the shits. You know, what is that? That's not a wrestling match. But when I watched it, it was probably my favorite match on the WrestleMania card, other than my own, of course. And that's just a testament to how interesting those characters are. Cena's Cena. You know, everybody loves Cena. Everyone knows Cena's talented. He's the biggest name. Since I laced up a pair of boots, he's been the biggest name almost. But the Fiend can hang. Bray Wyatt's, the way that he plays that character, the way that Bray Wyatt's played all these characters, even the Bray Wyatt character when he had Harper and Eric Rowan and Braun Strowman, the Wyatt family thing, like that was good stuff. And the story's there because, you know, of course, I think it was 2017, maybe 2016 that I was actually in the Wyatt family. I got to wrestle Bray at WrestleMania, beat him for the title. So if the Fiend has a bone to pick with anybody, it's the Legend Killer. That would be very interesting. I personally, I tend to feel as if I perform the best with a certain type of character, a certain type of WWE superstar, and Bray Wyatt doesn't really fit that mold. But I think with his ability to tell a story and his ability to portray these characters that he's come up with so well, I think that it's something we would have to do in the future. Hopefully the Fiend's around for a long time yet to come, and he's the new Undertaker. So I don't see how we could miss each other if that's the case. If I'm going to wrestle until I'm, 48, 47, whatever, into my late 40s, that's a long time. I'll cross paths with the Fiend at some point, and hopefully we put on a good show and tell a great story.
We will take our next question from Alex McCarthy with Talk Sports. Please go ahead.
Hi, Randy. How you doing?
Hello. I'm fine. Thank you.
Talk about was basically the character iterations you've had over the years. It always seems like you've thrived or maybe been more motivated when you've been these characters that do these dastardly things or portraying a heel, whatever you might call it. So leading back round to where you are now, I just wanted to talk about kind of what you feel most comfortable doing in WWE and what you've enjoyed the most. And in amongst that, how did you get the punt unlocked again? Was that a long process, something you'd wanted? Because it all plays a big part, I think, to a degree, in the character that you are right now.
Yeah, the first part of your question cut out. I didn't hear it, but I think I understand what you're asking. What do I enjoy being, babyface or heel? And but the beginning, if I miss part of your question, feel free to ask it again so I can hear the whole thing. But the punt kick was Arn Anderson's idea. I think it was 2007, and I was working with the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels, and I think he was the first guy that I kicked in the head. And back then it was a different time, and I kicked a lot of people in the head. And I've talked about taking care of your opponent, and I talk about how your number one priority should be making sure that you physically have your opponent's back above even having the best match on the card. It should be about taking care of each other as the first priority. So with that punt kick, It was hard. It was hard because I got to make this thing look good, and it's kind of hard to work, for lack of a better term, a kick to the head. That, devastating. And so a lot of people didn't want to take it. And, of course, I kicked Vince, and everyone remembers in 2009 when I kicked Vince, gave him a concussion, and he was gurneying out of the ring, and I think I split him open a little bit. And, that was me grabbing the brass ring. But I was so excited that I had this opportunity that I lost track. I lost sight of the number one priority being to take care of your opponent. Now, just with me being a little older and the current situation with the pandemic where we were taping for the past few months, I was able to play with the idea of bringing the punt kick back. Since I knew that I was doing a legend killer thing, had to bring back the punt kick. And I've devised a way to hit the kick, whether we're taping or whether we're live, where it's 100% safe and I'm not going to hurt anybody, like I said, because that's the number one priority for me in that ring. So given that, and given the fact it was outlawed, it was banned because it was so dangerous, now I think that I'm able to do it again because Vince trusts that I've figured out how to make it safe. And that's where we're at. So I'm glad he said yes, because goddamn, I was thinking about it the other day. I've kicked Edge, Christian, Show, Ric Flair, and Shawn Michaels. Just since the night after the Royal Rumble. That's 6-7 months and 5 kicks to 5 big names. That in itself got people talking. Each time I kick someone in the head, the way we do it, the way we tell that story, it's a part of that story that people remember, just like the promo with Ric Flair, just like when I RKO'd Beth Phoenix. So I think it's very important, and it's one of the reasons why people really hung on this story, because that move is a legitimate threat to whoever I'm in the ring with. And that helps my stock go up. I believe your other question was, what do I enjoy doing character-wise? And being a heel, I mean, I know you know the answer to that already. I love being a bad guy. It just comes more natural. I think when I turned babyface earlier in my career, I was completely lost, didn't know. I tried to change everything up. I tried to change the speed of my punches. I tried to smile more. And even for a little while, Vince McMahon, right when I went through the curtain every night, Monday Night Raw, SmackDown, pay-per-view, whatever, he'd look at me and he'd go, I want to see that smile. I want to see teeth. And I hated that. So I'm a good guy coming to the ring. Everyone's used to me being an asshole bad guy, heel, and now I'm smiling. And that wasn't what people wanted from me. They want me to be evil, cocky, narcissistic, and devious. And I think I'm able to play to those attributes better than being the happy-go-lucky good guy that's fighting for all the kids in the audience. There's a time and a place for that, but that wasn't me. Later in my career, when I became babyface, I had learned from those earlier mistakes from when I first turned babyface, and I stopped the smiling. I tried to keep parts of my heel persona that people like to see, because there's always been an intriguing aspect to the character that I play on TV, because it is so close to real life, and people know they're getting something that I'm true to. But I took those things that I do as a heel that people enjoyed, I kept doing them as a babyface, and I was able to kind of keep the audience into me being a good guy. And even as a good guy, I would do things at times that maybe a good guy wouldn't normally, necessarily do. That helped too. But each time I go babyface heel, the handful of times I've done that, every time I come back to being a heel or back to being a babyface, I feel like I've learned so much on the prior run that I'm always able to use it as a stepping stone to somehow, raise my value in that ring. And in this last case, it was the promos. I've also lost a little bit of weight. I'm about 15 to 18 pounds lighter than I was at WrestleMania. And I've done that just because I want to be able to move around a little quicker. I had gotten so heavy and was so much into trying to become the biggest man I could for when I face guys like Drew. But I realized it was just slowing me down. So I feel like right now, physically, mentally, character-wise, from all ends, each end of the spectrum, I think I'm a better talent for it. And this Sunday at SummerSlam, I'm going to put that on display in the Thunderdome, and I'm going to beat Drew McIntyre and become the 14-time WWE World Heavyweight Champion. And I'm at that point because of all the mistakes I made earlier in my career, all the mistakes in the ring and outside of the ring, and all the people like Ric Flair that had my back and told me when I did make a mistake why I made my mistake and helped me figure out for myself how I could not make that mistake again and how I could better myself. So I've had a great team of guys around me, both creatively, in the ring as opponents, in the cars, driving town to town. Very, very blessed. I've got to be one of the most blessed guys in this business, in this generation. And I know it. But I'm enjoying work. I'll leave you with this. I'm enjoying what I do for a living more now, I think, than I ever have. And because it's the pandemic era and there's no fans, that's the hardest way to do what we do. It is so hard. Before they started having developmental guys ringside for a little bit of noise, it was so hard to watch. And I got to, pat all these guys and girls on the back to go out there and do what they did and to not have that adrenaline rush from 20,000 people and, cheering and knowing that you're on live TV, to go out there and still have a ladder match at WrestleMania like I know a couple guys did. I think Kofi and John Hennigan, and I forget who the other guy was, but they killed each other out there. And in front of no fans, that makes it hard. So the fact that I feel like I'm on the top of my game right now during the pandemic era, to me, that just means, look the hell out. Look the hell out in a few months, maybe by next year's WrestleMania, maybe by Royal Rumble, when we're able to pack a stadium full of 75,000 people. It's going to be like the most invigorating feeling again to one day work in front of a loud crowd. So I feel like I am still at this point at the top of my game, only going to still get better.
Stephen, we're going to go to our final question, if that's okay. Final question.
Understood, sir. We will take our final question from Alistair McGeorge with Metro UK. Please go ahead.
Hi, Randy. Hi, Randy. How's it going?
Great.
Yeah. So your storyline with Drew has kind of touched a lot on him getting fired and clawing his way back and your own issues earlier in your career. So I was kind of wondering, early in your career, was there ever any concern from you as a person at the prospects of being released? And how do you think you'd have coped in Drew's situation at such a young age?
Oh, that's a hard question to answer. Knowing how I was back when I was young and making those mistakes, those bad decisions, getting in trouble and getting a second, third, fourth chance. Back then, I don't know that I would have reacted well. I don't know that I would have done the same thing Drew did. I think everything happens for a reason. If you look at Drew, he is the WWE champion right now. And he might not be if he wasn't fired and if he didn't go and wrestle all around the world and work with all these guys and learn and get better and get bigger. God, he put on 30 pounds. He looks great. He's got a look. His promos, you guys talk about how my promos have gotten better because I've kind of found myself on the mic. I feel like the same thing's really been happening with him this year too, especially since WrestleMania. And he's been the pandemic champion. I don't know if that's a term that I want to coin, but he's had a very, very hard job. He's been in a very, very hard position the last few months, and I think it's time to take that weight off of his shoulders Sunday at SummerSlam. And I'll take us out of the pandemic era into the next era, which will be the Randy Orton era.